I remember the exact sound of the laugh. It was not loud. It was not angry. It was light, casual, like someone telling a joke at dinner. But it broke something inside me. It was almost midnight. The house was quiet except for the soft sound of water running in the bathroom. Ethan was in the shower. I was sitting on the edge of our bed, folding one of his white shirts. The air smelled like steam and soap. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I smiled without thinking. He sometimes sent me little voice notes from the bathroom. Silly things. I love you. Bring me a towel. Guess what happened today? I picked up my phone. It was a voice note from Ethan. No text. Just the audio. I pressed play. At first, there was shuffling. Then I heard his voice. Clear. Relaxed. But he wasn't talking to me. He was laughing. "Mom, you should have seen her face today," he said. I froze. There was a pause, and then I heard my mother-in-law's voice faintly in the background. I couldn't make out her words, but she sounded amused. Ethan continued. "She really thinks she helped build this company," he said, still laughing. "It's cute." Cute. My fingers tightened around my phone. She's comfortable, that's all. She stays home, cooks, acts supportive. But let's be real, she'd be lost without me. My chest felt tight. Lost without him? He went on. "Everything is in my name anyway. The house, the cars, the accounts. If she ever tries anything, she walks away with nothing." There was a small pause. Then he said the words that made the room feel smaller. "She should be grateful I even married her." His mother laughed. Not shocked. Not confused. She laughed like she agreed. The sound of water in the bathroom kept running. The world inside that small space continued like nothing was wrong. But I couldn't breathe. My heart started beating so fast I could hear it in my ears. I pressed pause. Then I pressed play again. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I heard it wrong. But no. He said it again. Every word. Clear, sharp. I listened to the entire voice note 3 times. At the end, there was silence. Then it cut off. A second later, another message popped up. "Sorry, babe. Wrong send." Wrong send. That was all. No explanation, no panic, no apology. Just wrong send. I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands were shaking, but my face felt strangely calm. Like my body did not know how to react yet. In the bathroom, the shower turned off. My heart jumped. I quickly placed my phone face down on the bed. I stood up and walked toward the mirror. My reflection looked normal. My hair was loose. My eyes were wide but dry. I did not look like someone whose marriage had just cracked open. The bathroom door opened. Steam rolled out. Ethan stepped out with a towel around his waist, rubbing his hair with another towel. He smiled at me like he always did. "Hey," he said. "You're still up?" I nodded. He walked past me and kissed my forehead. The same lips that had laughed about me minutes ago. "You okay?" he asked casually. I swallowed. "Yes," I said softly. He picked up his phone from the bed. I watched his face carefully. For a split second, I saw it. His smile dropped. His eyes flickered. He looked at me. Then he forced a small laugh. "Oh," he said. "I sent you something by mistake. I didn't answer." He walked closer. "That voice note was for Mom. We were just joking. You know how she is." Joking. I looked at him. I searched his face for guilt, for shame, for something. I found nothing but mild discomfort like he had spilled coffee on a shirt. "It was just talk," he said. "You know I don't mean stuff like that." I tilted my head slightly. "Stuff like what?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. Then he waved his hand. "You know, just exaggerating. Don't take it seriously." Don't take it seriously. The house suddenly felt different. The walls that I helped paint. The couch I chose. The dining table I paid the first deposit on. Everything felt borrowed. Ethan yawned and climbed into bed. "Come on," he said. "It's late." I stood there for a few seconds before joining him. He turned off the lights. In the darkness, he moved closer and wrapped an arm around my waist. His breathing slowed after a few minutes. He fell asleep easily. I did not. I stared at the ceiling. My mind began replaying moments I had ignored before. The time he corrected me in front of his friends and said, "Relax, I handle the money." The time his mother told me, "A woman should never forget who provides." The time he removed my name from a joint account and said it was simpler that way. I had brushed it off. Love makes you explain away red flags. But tonight, there was no explaining. I carefully lifted his arm off me and reached for my phone again. I opened the voice note. I pressed play one more time. She's comfortable. She'd be lost without me. Everything is in my name. She walks away with nothing. I let every word sink in. Then something inside me shifted. The pain was still there, but under it, something colder formed. He thought I was comfortable. He thought I was small. He thought I had nothing. I slowly got out of bed and walked to the small office room down the hall. I did not turn on the main light, only the desk lamp. The soft yellow glow filled the room. I opened my laptop. For a moment, my hands hovered above the keyboard. Then I typed in an old password. The screen loaded. Folders appeared. Documents from years ago. Business registration forms. Consulting agreements. Investor emails. My name was on more things than Ethan remembered. Back when he needed me, my qualifications mattered. Back when he had nothing, my savings mattered. Back when no one believed in him, I did. I opened a file labeled Founding Agreement, Draft 1. There it was. My digital signature. My license number. My contribution statement. I leaned back slowly in the chair. The house was silent again. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry in the loud way. I was thinking, carefully, if I was so easy to control, why did he rush to text wrong send? If I was nothing, why did he look nervous? I closed the laptop gently. I walked back to the bedroom. Ethan was sleeping peacefully. He looked harmless. Soft. Almost innocent. But I now knew what he said when he thought I wasn't listening. I lay down beside him, but I did not move closer. I stared into the darkness and made a quiet promise to myself. I would not scream. I would not beg. I would not fight loudly. In the morning, I would smile. And then I would start walking. He believed I would leave with nothing. He forgot one thing. I helped build everything. And foundations are harder to erase than people think. When people look at Ethan now, they see confidence. They see tailored suits, expensive watches, a man who walks into rooms like he owns them. But I remember the version of him who counted coins before buying fuel. I remember the small apartment with cracked tiles and a leaking sink. I remember when his dreams were bigger than his bank account. Back then, I was the stable one. I worked in finance at a mid-sized firm. My job was not glamorous, but it paid well. I understood numbers. I understood contracts. I understood risk. Ethan understood ambition. We met at a friend's birthday dinner. He talked about building a real estate company that would change the skyline. His eyes were bright. He believed every word he said. I believed him too. Not because he was loud, but because he was hungry. At that time, he had nothing but a rough plan and confidence. No registered company, no investors, no office, just ideas. We started dating slowly. He would sit at my small kitchen table with sheets of paper spread everywhere. Business plans, sketches, numbers that didn't add up. "I just need someone to take me seriously," he once told me. I did. That was my first mistake. Or maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe loving someone always feels right in the beginning. When he said he wanted to register his company but didn't have enough money for the legal fees, I offered to help. "It's a loan," I told him. He smiled and kissed my hand. "You're investing in your future," he said. I transferred the money the next day. I helped him choose the company name. I reviewed the registration documents before submission. I noticed small errors the lawyer missed. When the business license came out, he held it up proudly. "Our company," he said. Our. That word meant everything to me. In the early months, I did more than encourage him. I created spreadsheets for projected costs. I connected him with an old colleague of mine who later became his first serious investor. I reviewed contracts before he signed them. Sometimes I stayed up until 2 a.m., correcting proposal drafts. He would fall asleep on the couch, tired from meetings, and I would quietly finish the work. I did not complain. I thought this was partnership. When his first small deal closed, he bought me flowers. "We did it," he said. I smiled. Yes, we did. As the months passed, the deals grew bigger. We moved into a better apartment. He began dressing differently, speaking differently. His phone rang more often. He started saying things like, "I have to maintain an image." At first, I was proud. Then I started noticing small changes. When people asked about the company, he began saying, "I built this from nothing." I would laugh lightly and add, "with a little help." He would smile but not correct the statement. It felt small. Too small to argue about. The first time his mother visited after the company began growing, she walked around our new apartment slowly. "It's nice," she said, touching the marble counter. "Hard work pays." Then she looked at Ethan. "I'm proud of you." She turned to me and smiled politely. "And you keep the home peaceful." That was the first time I felt invisible in my own story. I told myself I was overthinking. As the company expanded, Ethan insisted on restructuring finances. "It's cleaner if everything is in my name," he said. "Investors prefer that." I hesitated. "But I helped register the business," I reminded him gently. He wrapped his arm around my shoulder. "And I'll always remember that," he said. "This is just technical." Technical. I trusted him. I signed where he asked me to sign. I stepped back from active involvement because he said it looked more professional if he appeared independent. "You don't need to stress yourself," he said. "I'll handle it." I kept my job for a while longer. But as his schedule grew, our home needed more attention. Dinners with investors, hosting events, entertaining clients' wives. "It would mean a lot if you could focus on us," he said one night. I resigned from my job 3 months later. I told myself it was temporary. Temporary became permanent. The more successful he became, the less he asked for my opinion. He hired consultants to do the same work I once did for free. One evening, I overheard him telling someone on the phone, "Yeah, she doesn't really work anymore. She just supports from home." Just supports. The words stung, but I swallowed them. Support is important, I told myself. Then came the first real warning. I went to withdraw money from our joint account one afternoon. My card declined. I thought it was an error. At the bank, the representative looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, you were removed from this account 2 weeks ago." Removed? I confronted Ethan that night. "Oh," he said casually, "that's for business structuring. It's easier if the funds move through one primary holder." Primary holder. "You could have told me," I said softly. "I didn't think it was a big deal," he replied. That sentence echoed in my mind for days. I started noticing how often my contributions became not a big deal. When friends praised him, he accepted the compliments alone. When deals closed, he celebrated with partners. When I asked questions about finances, he said, "Don't worry about it." And slowly, without a fight, without a loud argument, I became background noise in my own marriage. His mother visited more often. She once sat beside me in the living room and said gently, "A smart wife knows when to let her husband lead. Too much involvement can make a man feel small." I nodded politely. Inside, something felt wrong. But I stayed quiet. Because I believed in marriage. I believed in loyalty. I believed love required sacrifice. Now, sitting in the dim office room the night after hearing that voice note, I replay those memories like pieces of a puzzle. Every moment I ignored. Every small sign. Every time I stepped back. He did not wake up one day and suddenly disrespect me. It happened slowly. In layers. In quiet decisions. In small dismissals. The truth is painful, but it is clear. He did not just build confidence. He built control. And I helped him do it. I close my eyes and remember the way he laughed in that voice note. Not stressed. Not angry. Relaxed. That was the real him. Not the man who kissed my forehead goodnight. Not the man who said, "We did it." But the man who believed I was replaceable. The man who believed I had nothing. I open my eyes and look around the office again. The shelves are filled with awards in his name. Certificates with his signature. Photos of ribbon cuttings where he stands in the center. But I remember the early nights. The drafts. The corrections. The money transfers from my account. He may have erased my name from the surface. But I know where it still lives. Buried in documents. Hidden in origins. Attached to foundations. And foundations matter more than trophies. As dawn begins to creep through the curtains, I feel something I have not felt in a long time. Clarity. I was never just comfortable. I was crucial. And if he truly believes I would walk away with nothing, he has forgotten who stood beside him when he had nothing at all. I did not sleep that night. But when the alarm rang at 6 a.m., I turned it off like always. I got up quietly. I brushed my teeth. I tied my hair back. I walked into the kitchen and started making breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee. My hands moved from habit, but my mind was sharp. Every sound in the house felt louder than usual. The kettle boiling, the spoon tapping the mug, the ticking clock above the fridge. Ethan walked in 10 minutes later, adjusting his tie. He looked normal, fresh, confident, calm. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I replied softly. He sat at the table and opened his phone, probably checking emails, maybe checking if I had replied to his message. I hadn't. He glanced up at me. "You okay?" he asked again. I placed the plate in front of him and smiled gently. "I'm fine." I watched him carefully as he ate. No guilt, no fear, just routine. He sipped his coffee and began talking about his big investor meeting scheduled for that afternoon. "This one changes everything," he said. "If this deal closes, we move to the next level." "Next level." I nodded like I always did. "That's great," I said. He stood up, grabbed his jacket, and walked over to me. He kissed my forehead again. "I'll be late," he added. "I know," I replied. He paused for a second, as if he wanted to say more, maybe to explain, maybe to laugh it off. But he didn't. He walked out the door. The sound of it closing echoed through the house. I stood still for a moment. Then I exhaled. The performance was over. I walked back into the bedroom and picked up my phone. I opened the voice note again. I listened to it one more time. Not because I needed proof, but because I needed to remember exactly how it felt. She'd be lost without me. I pressed stop. "No," I whispered. I would not be lost. I walked into the small office room and turned on my laptop. This time, I wasn't just looking. I was organizing. I opened the folder with the original business documents. I downloaded every file connected to the company's registration. I saved copies to a secure external drive. My name appeared again and again. Consulting license attached to early proposals. My signature on founding drafts. Emails between me and the first investor explaining financial strategy. I leaned back in the chair. He may have moved everything into his name later, but the roots still carried mine. I opened another folder. Bank statements. Old transfers from my personal account to cover early expenses. Legal fees. Office rent deposits. Website development costs. I had kept everything. Not because I expected this, but because I am careful. That part of me never disappeared. At 9:30 a.m., I picked up my phone and made the first call. "Aunt Gloria?" Her voice was warm and steady. "Naomi, sweetheart, you sound different." I hesitated. Then I said quietly, "You were right." There was silence on the other end. "What happened?" she asked. I did not explain everything. I did not cry. "I just need a lawyer," I said. Her voice changed immediately. "Come over." By 11 a.m., I was sitting at my aunt's dining table with a neat stack of printed documents in front of me. She read quietly. Her face did not show surprise. "Men like him grow too fast," she said finally. "And when they grow too fast, they forget who held the ladder." I swallowed. "I don't want drama," I said. "I just want what is mine." She nodded. "That's not drama, that's balance." By noon, she had connected me with a lawyer she trusted, a calm, middle-aged woman named Claire Bennett. I met Claire in her small office downtown. I handed her the documents. She reviewed them slowly, carefully. "Did you contribute financially at the start?" she asked. "Yes." "Did you provide licensed consulting services that strengthened investor trust?" "Yes." She tapped the papers lightly. "And your name is connected to these foundational agreements?" "Yes." She leaned back in her chair. "Well," she said calmly, "your husband built a tall building, but legally speaking, you helped pour the concrete." My chest felt lighter hearing someone else say it. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," she replied, "that if certain authorizations are withdrawn or challenged, his company could face serious complications, especially with new investors." I thought about the meeting he was probably preparing for at that very moment. The one he said would change everything. Would it destroy him? I asked quietly. Claire looked at me carefully. No, she said. It would correct him. That word stayed with me. Correct. I did not want revenge that burned everything down. I wanted truth. I wanted him to feel the weight of what he said. By 2 p.m., I was back in the car driving home. The house looked the same. Perfect lawn. Clean windows. Expensive gate. But it no longer felt like mine. I walked inside slowly. Every step felt steady. I went straight to the bedroom and pulled out one suitcase. Just one. I did not rush. I folded my clothes neatly. I packed my important documents. I placed my external drive in a small pocket inside. Then I walked into the living room. I looked around carefully. The artwork I helped choose. The couch I negotiated a discount for. The dining table I paid the first deposit on. He said I would walk away with nothing. He forgot I walked into this marriage with something. My phone buzzed suddenly. Ethan. I stared at the screen. It stopped. Then it buzzed again. I did not answer. A minute later, a text appeared. Call me. Then another. Why is Claire Bennett's firm contacting our legal department? I felt my heartbeat slow instead of speed up. So he found out. Good. Another call came in. I let it ring. Then a message. What are you doing? I picked up the phone, but I didn't call him. Instead, I opened the voice note again. I read the transcript I had typed out earlier that morning. She should be grateful I even married her. I walked to the dining table and placed my wedding ring gently on the wood. Beside it, I placed a printed copy of the transcript. Highlighted. Not dramatic. Not messy. Clear. My phone buzzed again. This time, a message from Daniel Brooks, his business partner. Naomi, we need to talk. I smiled faintly. The cracks were already spreading. And Ethan was just beginning to realize. The woman he thought was comfortable was actually the foundation he could not afford to lose. By the time the sun began to set, my phone had stopped buzzing. Not because Ethan had given up, but because something bigger had taken his attention. I knew his meeting with the new investors was scheduled for 3 p.m. By 3:40 p.m., Claire had already sent formal notice withdrawing my consulting authorization connected to the company's early formation documents. Not loudly, not emotionally, just legally. Precise. I imagined the scene without being there. A conference room with glass walls. Ethan standing tall in front of a screen, presenting growth charts and expansion plans. Daniel sitting beside him, calm as always. Investors nodding. Then someone checking documentation. A quiet question. Why is there a notice of authorization withdrawal attached to the foundational agreements? Silence. I didn't need to see it to know the air would change. Because foundations matter. At 4:12 p.m., my phone rang again. Ethan. This time, I answered. His voice was no longer calm. What did you do? I didn't raise my voice. I corrected something, I said. Corrected? He snapped. Do you have any idea what you just caused? Yes, I replied. There was heavy breathing on the other end. You're embarrassing me in front of investors. Embarrassing. The word almost made me laugh. You embarrassed me last night, I said quietly. He went silent. For a moment, I wondered if he would deny it. He didn't. You're overreacting, he said instead. It was a private conversation. You accidentally made it public, I replied. That doesn't mean you destroy everything. I looked around the living room one last time. I didn't destroy anything, I said. I reminded them I exist. He didn't speak. I could hear voices in the background, muffled, tense. Naomi, he said finally, lowering his tone, let's talk about this at home. I'm not home, I replied. And that was the first true sentence of my new life. There was a long pause. Where are you? He asked. Somewhere I'm not lost, I said softly. Then I ended the call. I picked up my suitcase and walked out of the house. Not in anger. Not in tears. In clarity. I stayed at my Aunt Gloria's house that night. She didn't ask too many questions. She simply placed a cup of tea in front of me and waited. Around 7 p.m., Claire called. The investor meeting ended early, she said. They've requested a full internal review of all founding documents before proceeding. I closed my eyes slowly. And Daniel? I asked. He's protecting himself, she replied. He claims he wasn't aware your authorization was still active in certain agreements. Of course he wasn't. Because Ethan never thought it mattered. Claire continued. Your financial contributions from the early phase are also documented clearly. That strengthens your position significantly. Position. It sounded like chess. And maybe it was. But I didn't feel like a player. I felt like someone reclaiming oxygen. Later that evening, my phone lit up again. A message from Daniel Brooks. Naomi, I think we need to meet. There are implications here that affect everyone. I stared at the text for a moment. Then I typed back, I'm available tomorrow at 10 a.m. with my lawyer present. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then disappeared. Then reappeared. Finally, his reply came, Understood. Understood. For the first time, someone in Ethan's world understood that I was not background noise. Around 9 p.m., Ethan showed up at my aunt's house. I knew it was him before anyone said anything. His car engine has a distinct hum. Aunt Gloria looked at me calmly. Do you want to see him? She asked. I thought about it. Yes, I said. He walked in without his usual confidence. His tie was loose, his hair slightly messy. He looked smaller. Not physically, but emotionally. Naomi, he began, stepping toward me. I stayed seated. You went too far, he said. I raised an eyebrow. Too far? You could have talked to me. I tried, I said. Last night. He ran a hand over his face. I told you it was a joke. I felt something inside me harden. You called me lost, I said. You said I should be grateful you married me. It was just talk, he insisted. I stood up slowly. Talk shows truth when you think no one is listening. He looked at my aunt briefly, then back at me. You're risking everything, he said. No, I replied calmly. I'm risking what you built. I'm protecting what I built. His jaw tightened. You want money? He asked bluntly. Is that what this is? The question didn't hurt. It revealed him. This isn't about money, I said. It's about respect. He didn't answer. Because he had none left to offer. You could ruin the company? He said quietly. I held his gaze. You already did, I replied. Silence filled the room. He looked like he wanted to argue. But instead, he said something softer. I worked hard for this. I nodded. So did I. He had no response. For the first time since I met him, Ethan looked uncertain. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because he didn't know how to control the situation. And that scared him. You're not thinking clearly, he said finally. I've never thought more clearly, I answered. He looked around the small living room, probably realizing how different it felt from the house we shared. Less expensive, but more honest. Come home, he said quietly. I shook my head. That house stopped being home when you decided I was nothing. His shoulders dropped slightly. He knew I meant it. After a long moment, he turned toward the door. This isn't over, he said. I know, I replied. He left. The sound of his car fading into the distance felt final. Not because everything was finished, but because something had shifted permanently. Later that night, I received one last update from Claire. The investors have paused the deal indefinitely, she said. They're concerned about internal stability. Internal stability. That was the polite term for cracks in the foundation. I lay in bed in the guest room at my aunt's house and stared at the ceiling. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel cruel. I felt steady. He once said I would walk away with nothing. But tonight, his empire was shaking. And I was not shaking with it. Because for the first time in years, I was standing on my own ground. When Ethan said, they pulled out, I did not feel joy. I felt the weight of it. 3 years of meetings, flights, late nights, promises. Gone. Not because I screamed. Not because I lied. But because I stopped protecting a lie. I worked 3 years for this deal. He said again over the phone, his voice shaking now. And I worked 6 years for this marriage. I replied quietly. Silence. Not the kind filled with anger. The kind filled with realization. You didn't have to go this far, he said finally. I looked out the window of my aunt's house. Children were playing across the street. A woman was watering plants. Life was moving normally. You went that far first, I said. You just didn't think I heard you. He exhaled sharply. So what do you want? He asked. There it was. The question he should have asked years ago. What do you want? Not, "Why are you embarrassing me?" Not, "How could you do this?" Just that. But it came too late. "I want what's mine," I said, "and I want the truth to stand on its own." He didn't argue this time, because deep down, he knew the truth was not on his side. By afternoon, the news had begun spreading quietly in his business circle. Nothing public, but investors talk. Partners whisper. When a major deal collapses due to foundational documentation review, people ask questions. Daniel requested a formal meeting at his office the next morning. Claire insisted on being present. When I walked into that office the next day, I did not feel small. The receptionist looked surprised to see me. For years, I had been Ethan's wife. Today, I was something else. Daniel stood up when I entered the conference room. He looked tired. "You understand what this has caused," he began carefully. "Yes," I said. He folded his hands on the table. "Why now?" I met his eyes. "Because now I know what he thinks of me." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. He had probably heard the voice note by then. Ethan must have played it in anger or desperation. "I wasn't aware your authorization was still tied to those agreements," Daniel said. "That's because Ethan never thought it mattered." I replied calmly. Claire placed copies of the founding documents on the table. My client contributed financially and professionally in the company's earliest stage, she said clearly. Any narrative that excludes her role is inaccurate. Daniel nodded slowly. "What are you asking for?" he said again. "Fair question," I answered without hesitation. "Formal recognition of my founding contribution, financial compensation reflecting early investment and intellectual input, and an equitable separation of marital assets." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "That could cripple liquidity," he admitted. Claire spoke before I could, or it could prevent a longer legal battle that would damage the company far more. The room fell quiet. Daniel understood numbers. He understood risk. And for the first time, I was not invisible in the equation. That evening, Ethan came to see me again. But this time, there was no anger in his eyes. Only something I had never seen before. Fear. Not fear of losing me. Fear of losing control. "You're really going through with this," he said softly. "Yes." He ran his hands through his hair. "I built this from nothing." "No," I said gently. "You built it from support." He looked at me sharply. "I supported you," I continued, "with money, with knowledge, with connections, with sacrifice." His face softened for a second, then hardened again. "I said stupid things," he admitted. "Fine." I was venting. "You were honest," I corrected. He sat down heavily. "I didn't mean you were nothing, but you meant I was replaceable." He didn't deny it. That hurt more than if he had shouted. "You think destroying my business proves something?" he asked quietly. "I'm not destroying it," I said. "I'm separating from it." He stared at me like he was finally seeing someone new. "Who are you right now?" he asked. I held his gaze. "The woman you forgot." That was the moment something changed in him. Not anger. Not pride. Understanding. Slow and painful. "You kept all those documents," he murmured. "Yes." "You remembered every contribution." "Yes." "And you waited." I shook my head. I didn't wait for revenge. I waited for respect. He looked down at his hands. For years, those hands signed contracts without hesitation. Now they trembled slightly. "I thought you needed me," he said quietly. I smiled faintly. "I wanted you," I replied. "That's different." That sentence seemed to break something inside him. Because he finally understood. He mistook love for weakness. He mistook trust for dependence. He mistook silence for ignorance. "You're going to take half," he whispered. "I'm going to take what reflects truth," I answered. The legal negotiations moved quickly after that. Investors pressured for stability. Daniel pushed for settlement to avoid extended scrutiny. Ethan had two choices: fight publicly and risk exposing everything, or settle privately and protect what remained. He chose survival. Within weeks, agreements were signed. My early financial investments were acknowledged formally. My intellectual contributions were documented in revised founding records. Marital assets were divided equitably, not because he was generous, but because the alternative would have destroyed everything completely. The empire did not collapse overnight, but it cracked. Its shine faded. Its story changed. No longer the tale of a self-made man, but the story of a man who forgot who helped him rise. The final time I saw Ethan as my husband, he handed me the settlement documents. "You didn't have to ruin my image," he said quietly. I looked at him calmly. "You ruined it yourself," I replied. He nodded slowly. "I never thought you would do this." "That was the problem." He let out a small, tired laugh. "I thought you were comfortable." "I was building," I said. He looked around the empty house. Most of the furniture was already divided. The walls felt colder. "I guess I underestimated you," he admitted. "Yes?" I said softly. "You did." There was no screaming. No dramatic goodbye. Just the quiet end of something that had already broken. As I walked toward the door with my final box in my hands, he said one last thing. "I did love you." I paused. I believed him. In his own way, he did. But love without respect becomes control. And I could not live inside that anymore. "I loved you too," I said. Then I stepped outside. Months later, I moved into a smaller place of my own. Not as large. Not as flashy. But mine. I returned to consulting work under my own name. Clients respected me. Investors listened. Not because I was someone's wife, but because I was capable. One evening, as I was organizing files in my new office, I opened the old transcript of that voice note. I read the line again. She should be grateful I even married her. I no longer felt pain when I read it. Only clarity. Gratitude should never be demanded. Respect should never be optional. And foundations should never be mocked. Ethan once believed I would walk away with nothing. Instead, I walked away with truth, dignity, and my share. And the empire he built? It still stands. But it stands differently now, with cracks that remind him every day. He was never self-made. And the woman he laughed about in a voice note was the reason he rose at all. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more interesting revenge stories.